Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called Music Education is the Transmission of the Counterintuitive. And the reason why it is the transmission of the counterintuitive is because actually all education is the transmission of the counterintuitive. So this video is going to be, I hope, me trying to explain a very simple but actually a very intuitive idea which actually seems to be ignored by the mainstream education systems and has a very specific outcome for music at the moment. So what do I mean by music education is the transmission of the counterintuitive? Well, I'm a self-taught drummer. I'm a self-taught musician. When I started, I had a pair of drumsticks and no drum kit, and I had a classical nylon string guitar. And with those things and a record collection, I started on what has become my career. But that journey to where I am now, I suppose, where for some reason fate has put me in a position where I have had to transmit what I knew to other people, which happened when I was 22 years old. So by 22 years old, I was having people approach me to my own bemusement that was saying they would pay me if I told them how to play the drums like I could play the drums. So I had obviously got something right, because a lot of people were coming up and asking me this stuff. I had never had a lesson myself. So when they come up to me, I didn't have what a lot of music teachers have, is the sort of blueprints of the teacher they had before. So that, you know, most people when they're asked to teach, will basically, if they've had lessons, will get out the exercises that they were given by their teacher and start to run through that, assuming that that's the way you do it, because you assume the teacher knows what they're doing and you assume that's the way you teach the instrument. I didn't have that. So I sort of worked it out from the ground up. So I had to sort of go, what did I do? And what I did, the thing I didn't really grasp at that point, is what I did was what I did. And I had to ask myself the question as why these guys didn't do what they didn't do. That is fundamental. What I've just explained there is fundamentally the beginning and the end and the totality of music education, if you can get your head around it. Anyway, so I started to think, well, the first thing I did was I lit a rock beat, I suppose, and then some fills, and then I hit that problem with my right foot and it wouldn't coordinate against my right. I had to break that. How did I break that? Oh, I remember I did like this. And so I started to pull together over the years a way of teaching drums. And not wanting to do a proper job, I found that this is quite a good way of earning a living. And then because I was doing that, I got asked to teach in colleges, and then I broadened what I could teach. And here I am now, you know, 30 odd years later, 35 years later, nearly 40 years later. And that is what I have become. And as the education system crashes around us, I have had to jump ship onto the YouTube. And so I approach YouTube like I'm a teacher, like I used to approach my lessons. And what's interesting is that, unlike the lessons where the kids don't believe you when you say these things, they don't believe you, but they just sit there with their mouths shut. They ain't going to question it. They're just going to go, he's just talking rubbish, old man, that's talking rubbish. So that's what you get in a college. Here you get pushback, and you get pushback, they go, no, that's not right. And I'm often thinking, why are they thinking that I'm not right? Because intuitively they think it's not right. There's not been that huge amount of thought in the pushback. So basically what I'm trying to explain here is, in teaching for 40 years, I realized there were certain things that people got wrong about music. If I could get those things across to people, they then did a lot better. But the trouble is, they didn't believe it. And so my job as a teacher was trying to transmit the counterintuitive. Now, any music teachers out there will attest to this, that especially when you're teaching music, you don't ever feel like you're just passing over knowledge or information. What you feel like you're doing is you're trying to persuade the person to believe you. Am I right or am I wrong? And that fundamental thing, I thought, what actually is going on here? And what it is that when you start doing music, you will have an intuitive idea of how you do music, because basically music is it's fundamentally this: And this really even goes even further back to the very fundamental thing about music making and music listening. You listen to music, you love it. Some people have a love for music that's even deeper than most normal people. Some people can get rid of that by just simply going out and dancing or doing something like that. But for those of us who can't dance, right, what we can do is then learn an instrument, and we can get even more involved in it. And so a little bit like a child that hasn't learned to walk or talk, sitting in the living room, looking at their parents and their older brothers and sisters walking around and talking, they go, I want this so bad. I want to be a part of it. I'm going to learn to walk. So their motivation to walk is there. It's there and seeing it. I want to walk. You know, the amount of people have told me that their kid didn't really want to walk, and then some kid came around to stay and they were running around all over the place and playing games, and the next minute, kid just stands up, starts walking around. Because that is what motivates us to do stuff. It's what gets us out in bed. You know that thing when you lie in bed, don't want to get out of bed. Don't want to get out of bed. If I did get out of bed, I could do that. And then suddenly you're out of bed. You don't even make the decision. That's what music is. That is what music is. I love music so much that I wanted to be a part of it. And I love the drums, and I love the sound, and I love the groove, and I love the funkiness, and I had to get to it. And so I used my intuition, you know. Oh, so he's hitting the eye out there. I could sort of teach myself. Now, some musicians could sort of teach themselves completely, and other musicians can't, it seems. And the musicians that are really, really good are the ones who could sort of teach themselves. That's the problem for music education, isn't it? If you got that one out there, it would almost expose the whole music education thing, which is a $1 billion industry. It would expose it, right? And that goes to people's intuitive ideas that you've either got it, if you can't teach groove. I mean, you can teach people to play the notes, but you can't teach them to play the music. All that thing is there. And I thought, no, this can't be the case. And I went down a rabbit hole 20, 30 years ago. And the big difference for me was when I suddenly started thinking that this is just muscle memory, although muscle memory is not the right word, but this is just muscle memory. So there's something going on in the brain. I wonder how we'd work out what is actually going on in the brain. And around the time I started to think like this, I was actually doing a teacher training course, a postgraduate teacher training qualification that I never got. Because I'd become so disenchanted at that point. That was the point when I jumped out and became a real musician, playing tours and doing all the proper stuff, you know. But what was interesting is that when we went and did the theory, it was all psychology. So I did my own research into psychology, and I came up with the conclusion that a lot of what psychologists were doing was going to be replaced by cognitive science. And cognitive science offered a way to understand how the fine motor skill, which was drumming or playing a guitar, works, and how that was linked to the stimulation, which was in this case listening to music and loving it. And I started to got involved with cognitive scientists. I asked them to explain in simple terms that a music teacher could understand what was being learned from cognitive science, which was a lot and is a lot at the moment. That is the great revolution that's going on at the moment. It's the cognitive science revolution, and the study of the genome as well. Those two things are massive. And so I started to, from my point of view, go, well, what do I add to this? I'm a drummer, aren't I? So I could look at the drumming end of it. And I spent a long time doing this. I had my own drum school, and this is what I was doing all day long. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee now. First sip of coffee of the day. Lovely. So, what happened next? I started to realise that students were best off when they were learning it themselves. So I started to teach from the idea, go, this is the principle. So sometimes they didn't understand principles. And I used to think, why don't they understand principles? Well, my teaching became principle-based, right? So you might say to someone, you're trying to play fast. That shouldn't be the principle you're trying to attain. You should be trying to attain playing very in time, because that's much more useful aesthetically. And all the drummers that you really love, more than playing fast, which might be in your intuitive view, the thing that you're impressed by, actually it's the fact that they're playing fast, but in time, that's blowing you away. Oh, we listen to your playing, you're not in time. So you need to put that principle up first, right? That would be an idea. Or you're never going to, in the drums, it might be you're never going to grip the stick tight. Now, people will go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But intuitively, when they're actually practicing and they're trying to play fast, for example, because they've got that principle, they might start gripping the stick tight, thinking by gripping the stick tight they will be able to play faster, when it's counterintuitive, the fact that by gripping the stick looser you will be faster. That is the counterintuitive things. And so I got into the position that I described at the top of this video, which I would sit looking at a student thinking, my job here is not to tell them how to do it, it's to persuade them to change their counterintuitive point of what they think music is. Now, this video, I hope, will be of interest to everybody, because the counterintuitive ideas we have are the ideas that the fan base has about music. People listen to music and they love it, but then they have thoughts about music, because some of the ideas they have are counterintuitive. Sorry, they're intuitive, but they're wrong. And if you want to educate someone, not just as a player, but as a listener, again, they're going to have to take on the counterintuitive. So to put this in simple terms, if you leave someone alone, they will learn a whole bunch of stuff. You don't need to teach that. But when they can't do something, the reason they can't do something and they've gone to a teacher is because they didn't of their own accord acquire it. And they are sat frustrated going, why can't I do this? I've been trying to do this for a long time. So their intuitive idea on their own, or it could have been given them by another teacher, the worst thing that ever happens. The idea that this is how you get there and it's not working, when you go to see them, you have to get to the underlying principle and undo that. And so you are trying to transmit the counterintuitive. Okay? So once you understand that, the best learning environment in a college would be that the students could just get on with it and they are really doing it. The ideal college would be you turn up, you're in a music ensemble, right? You have creative control of that music ensemble, because that's really, really important, and that never gets taught. That's another video altogether. But you go in, you rehearse, and you play. And then you hit problems, and the college's job is to make people aware of these problems, and then to teach the counterintuitive stuff they need to do, so that they will eventually, because it is always eventually, change their tack and then start to achieve what they want to achieve. Now, I'm going to explain this in yet another way now. Everything that I have learned has not been learnt through sitting and practicing for hours and hours. That's just something I have done, right? And I do that all the time. I've examined why I do that all the time, and I know why. And I know what the motivation is for me to practice when other people I know don't want to practice. I know what that is. And the reason is counterintuitive. It's actually based upon, it's based upon the fact that you believe that through repetitive practice, you will get better. That's the intuitive idea. And I know when I say that to a lot of musicians, I go, well, Andy, that is what it is, because it's intuitive to you. Right, the repetitive practice should be the byproduct of your love of music, and it should be the byproduct of the situation that you are in, that you love. Right, nobody gets good because they want to do repetitive practice, and they're good moral beings, and they sit and do it even though they hate it. They like doing it. So the counterintuitive bit here is having the teacher saying, you know, you've got to learn to love this. Absolutely love it. But I don't love it. Why don't you love it? It's just boring, isn't it? So you've got to make it not boring, haven't you? Yeah, but it doesn't matter what you do, because you can dress it up, but you know, you can't fool me. I know that I'm just doing the same exercise over and over again. So why don't you like doing the same exercise over and over? I just don't really. So what do you want to play the drummers for? What do you mean? Well, say most gigs, you're just going to play a rock beat over and over again. Oh, well, I can do that. So why did you do the rock beat over and over again? Well, I don't know. It's the only thing I could play in the early days. Oh, so the limitations made you practice. Maybe not having limitations now. Maybe the fact that you've acquired something is why you don't want to acquire any more. Why don't you want to acquire any more? I don't know. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. So you don't actually want to get better. But I do. Why do you want to get better? So this would be the conversation that you have to lead someone to the point, which I am not going to do here, because it's actually different to every single person individually. That's why teaching is very important, because a teacher can hold a mirror up to yourself and show you and take you to that point. But what's much more important here for this video is to look at how the counterintuitive manifests itself in terms of music, because what we have is music as aesthetic. People love music, and then they make judgments based upon their love of music, right? So I am going to explain the fundamental thing here, which will be of use to all non-musicians and musicians, and will hopefully get you to have some sort of idea of how this all works, right? And then you'll have to accept it. If you don't accept it, it's because it seems counterintuitive to you, right? People like music. Some people like music more than others. Some people love music so much that it almost gives them a sort of spiritual experience when they heard it. That's what I had with music. Music has always been the closest thing to magic for me. It's transformational. Absolutely transformational. And I love it. I love the fact that life is what it is, and it's full of nice things and not so nice things. But music can turn any situation into a wondrous situation. I could sit in the forest and I could enjoy it. But I enjoy it more when I close my eyes and actually start to listen to the music of the forest. Now, if a beautiful string quartet started to stream in, that would seem like a miracle to me. That would be like hyper reality. That's what music does. It elevates things to hyper reality. When you watch a film, it's enjoyable because the music's elevating everything to being hyper reality, right? Or the sounds are. Really, I find that fascinating. So around the age of about, I would say 77, so I was about 9, I suddenly realised I'm really into music. And I think everybody's like this. Everybody's into music. I start banging stuff, tapping stuff. I'm tapping along to it. I jump around my room to music. The music is going in me, and it's created a motivation. That motivation will always come out of movement. It might be singing, it might be whistling, but that's all that is movement. Singing, whistling, talking is all movement. No, it seems counterintuitive, but it's actually true. And if you think about it, you go, yeah, he's right there. It is movement, isn't it? Yeah, and it's learned in exactly the same way as we learn movement. And so what music does was promote movement. If you give somebody a guitar, they will start to imitate what they think is what the guitarist is doing, right? And depending on how observant or not, they will come up with an idea and they'll start to do it. Now, the thing is, to get good, they have to develop fine motor control. And fine motor control is developed through a feedback mechanism where you throw shapes in, there's a chaos going on, and your body takes feedback and then starts to refine the feedback based upon the thing that you're trying to get it to do, which in this case is not running away from tigers or being able to throw a spear at a bison, or just be able to stop someone from hitting you in the face. All these things that we had to learn when we were along, these motor things that aren't, these aren't wired in. All that's not, walking, talking is not wired in. If you understand how we learn to walk and talk, you will understand how you learn to play an instrument. You are hijacking, when you learn to play an instrument, you are hijacking a process is there to keep you alive. That's why it's hard to do. You have to do a repetitive thing to such an extent that it becomes part of your system. So rather than reacting to threat, you are reacting to the aesthetics of music. And the reaction time has to be as small as you can possibly get it. That's the fine motor control. That's what's actually going on when you're learning music. Right. When you're listening to music, your focus has to be on the music, and that's hard to do. To retain the focus and have the sort of energy to maintain that focus is hard to do. But it comes through practice, and it comes through the intuitive, the counterintuitive. Sometimes someone will say to you, just listen to that bit there and just focus on it. Or see that person there, the bit they're doing, they're making up on the spot. Or listen to the way the chords work against the meaning of the lyrics. There's all these things that can enhance your listening, and they might be counterintuitive until somebody says what they are. With a musician, the music motivates them to do something. And there's, like with me, I had a pair of drumsticks in the house and a guitar. So I just start strumming away on that, and I slowly start to move towards having the instrument. Now, whatever I'm doing will develop some level of skill. Now, that you don't care. So most people start their instrument like this. They're like, I just love this. I just want to play. And I've heard there's these 3 chords. If I nail those 3 chords, I can play anything. That's a good bit of knowledge, that is. So they really work. They really got those 3 chords down. And then they could join a band with their mates. And the next thing, they're there. And they're playing their punk tracks, and it's all visceral and expressing themselves. And thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. And my singers writing good lyrics, and as long as we play this with a load of sort of energy, it seems that people really love it. Oh my God, we only need these 3 chords. This is amazing. But then they play them. They go out and do gigs, and they may get successful. They're playing these chords over and over again, and they get good at playing chords. And then they think, well, now I can play these chords, and then the other chords on. They learn a whole bunch of the new chords. They turn up in the rehearsal room. I've got some new chords here. Oh my God, I got a bit sick of that ones. Yeah, we got more. I could write some more songs. And they slowly start to intuitively acquire skill. Somebody might come and say, oh, do you know a B minor chord? Oh, I don't know that. How do you play that one? That's a hard one. And F's hard. Oh my God, but they're better now. They got more skill. At this point, they make an intuitive jump they go. All that stuff at the beginning was really good, right? Because we were just getting out and playing and everyone loved it. But now it's getting better because I'm acquiring skill. I wonder how skillful guitarists are. That suddenly, and then they go on to the internet maybe, or they go to a gig and they see some guy get up and they go, oh my God, what's this person doing? That's a miracle. And their personality kicks in. They will either go like me, I want that. I want to be like that guy. What's he doing? I didn't even know what he's doing, but it's amazing. How can he even be doing this? There's those people, and there's those people that go, oh, that's a load of rubbish. I'm quite happy where I am playing my 3 chords. I don't need any more than those chords. I just need some sort of ideology that backs that up, because really, I was reading this critic in this magazine the other day, and he was saying the proper music is made by people who can only play 3 chords, because that's how you express yourself. Now this intuitive idea comes out, there's expression, and that's based on some sort of incompetence in music. It doesn't happen in other art forms, but incompetence is expression, and skill means that it's less emotional. And these ideas start to come up and they start to inform someone. But what's much more interesting is once you get to that point, this high motivation phase, where you go, I don't care whether they're any good or not. I'm not measuring themselves like that. These people are now measuring themselves, and they're using ideas to place themselves ideologically in a certain place, and battles start to emerge, right? I know these inside out. A lot of what I do on this channel is I will go, oh, Dave Gilmour's not the best guitarist in the world. Of course he's not the best guitarist in the world, but there's people there that go, but I think he is. And I've created an ideology that places him there. And this ideology that he plays melodically and he plays economically, and the brevity in which he plays makes him better. He's actually morally better as a player. And this stuff starts to come up, and I know it's there. And so I can just do a list. And the payoff is that Dave Gilmour is at number 1. And all those people I described out there, some of them are going, oh, Andy's pushed the button. Let's see what happens now. They're going to go up the wall when he has a go at Dave Gilmour. I know, because I know how it was. I know how this works inside out. I've had 40 years being a professional musician and a professional music lecturer, and being really into this, the philosophy of it, the aesthetics of it. I know where those buttons are. I used to push them in my students. You know why I used to push them in with my students? Because those who had just got locked in to this measurement thing, once you get to this measurement thing, your motivation is gone. You're not in the motivation phase anymore. Listening to music, you don't even like listening to music. You're playing music, you're in a band, but you actually think, oh, I don't like the bands. I don't like these bands. And every time I listen to music, all I hear is people better than me. And what's the point? I can't see what the point is, Oh, I don't know. And it's like, I have this ideology where I believe playing those 3 chords is like, that's where you get the emotion. But they got the other bloke in, he was playing the same 3 chords. He sounded way better than me. And I know it's all a bit depressing, and I'm measuring myself against everybody. You go into this highly demotivated stage. Now, when I used to teach, the kids I got at 16, they started playing around about 12, 13. When they arrived, they were past the motivation stage, and they are in this depressed, measurement stage. And so everything was how they were judged. It was like if someone was brilliant and got up and played in that class, everyone else was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, it's depressed me. I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play anymore. There used to be a time when you heard something like that, you go, oh my God, I can't do that. But I want it so bad, I'm just going to try and get it. And now like, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to know. And so I started to realize that I had to re-engage the motivation phase in these kids. And I realised the only way that you could do that was by taking them to next level. So what you had to do is find some music. Now that they were more sophisticated. It didn't matter, even if they were more sophisticated as bigger punk musicians. There's great punk musicians and there's not so great punk musicians. Whatever it is, I'm not saying that they got to go towards jazz, fusion, or prog, or playing technically. It could be that they go towards songwriting. It could be they start to explore heavier lyrics. They could be looking at the production. They might want to look to electronic music, or they might want to be an artist, or they might want to look at how they present themselves as a sort of entertainer. Or they might want to make people laugh. But at that point, the musician has to find the next thing that's going to motivate them. And I came up with the idea, which served me quite well as a teacher, that if you examine the seeds of what you got you into it in the first place, with the knowledge you've got now, and you could see the underlying thing that you loved, you could then search that out in other music, but with the awareness that you are now in a place where you are not going to accept that music. You now have the barrier up against that music, even though it's there and it wants you to love it. But if you could open yourself up to that new music. So basically, a lot of the teaching I would do was to go, you want to go here, so you need to listen to this guy. And so I would start to do lectures, which I would go through the history of music, and I would try and introduce every single band I could. Not just, I would go about all the prog bands, and I would go on about Alan Holdsworth and the Mavish Orchestra and Yes and Genesis, but I would also go on about Public Enemy and NWA and the Sex Pistols and Kraftwerk and the New York Dolls and the Grateful Dead and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday and Charlie Parker and Louis Jordan. And I would try and do this historical thing, hoping that when people got taken up in the story of things, and a lot of this I did by going, I'd walk in and say, what's a band you all like? And we'd find there 3 people. They had a band and say, what's your favourite band? They'd name a band, you know, it's like Bullets for My Valentine or something. So I'd get them to do some research. What band were they influenced by? And they were influenced by this band. You know, it might have been, I don't know, Nirvana. So who were Nirvana influenced by? Well, they were influenced by the Pixies, and they were influenced by Black Sabbath, and they were also influenced by Lead Belly. And then students would go, well, who's this then? Who's this? You know? And so I would play them it. And that link that I'd established of going backwards from where they were, they would go, actually, I'm really interested in this. Who was this Lead Belly bloke? That's the song that Kurt Cobain does on the Unleaded one, isn't it? So who was this? Well, he was a murderer. Really? Yeah, he was a murderer. They discovered him in prison. No way. What was he a murderer for? Who did he kill? I think he killed his cousin or something. Why? It was just a fight. But he was growing up in a really bad time at that point, you know, being a black man in America at that point, you know, that whole prisons are full of black people. And, you know, nobody really cared about the music they played at the time. So when people started to care, people would go into the prisons to interview these prisoners because they'd been stuck there for 10, 20 years. And it was like a type, really? This, to a musician, would open them up. And so to get them to the next level was almost like taking them back, hold their hand and going, you have all this skill now. You have your own specific skill. You have got it. Don't believe you haven't. You need to apply it to this new fine vision about how you got motivated for music in the first place. And the way I did that was actually taking them back to the very first music they liked, which was before they got cool. I would go back to now for me, I can tell you what those records are, and I go back to them regularly. Amy Stewart, You Can Ring My Bell. I love that tune. I absolutely loved. I couldn't stop listening to it. Called for Cats by Squeeze. This is all around 79. I'm 11 years old. I was just obsessed with. I would get up every morning and play these. Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick by Ian Dury. These are the songs that first really got me into it before I discovered the new wave of British heavy metal and then turned my back on this. But the song I was obsessed with was Pop Music by the band M. That's, to this day, that was the first song I absolutely loved, that I was obsessed with. I recorded it off the radio and I would just listen to it round in a circle over and over again. And it actually contains within it everything that I loved. And by analysing it, when I got to the point where I was so involved in technique on the drums, which was around about 2000, I started doing clinics 2000, 2002, and I got very demotivated, I went back to, then I heard that track and I thought, I'm into groove, I'm into sort of weird electronics, I'm into a hybrid of sort of funkiness, progginess, which was in that band as well. And I was able to establish what I liked so much about it. And what I loved about it more than anything else was the vocals, the backing vocals. The lead singer was very proggy. He was very like, so we're on the video, boogie with a suitcase. It's got no soul whatsoever. I like that. I like that sort of English aesthetic that was in there, but the backing vocals were going, pop, pop, pop music, and they just grooved. And I realised something was in there, and it opened up a line. And I actually went back and listened to music that I loved when I was listening. I went back to Led Zeppelin and thought, you love Led Zeppelin so much. It wasn't just the rocking, was it? It's Led Zeppelin 3 you love. You love that English aesthetic. And then all my ideas started to form out of that. So as we get to the end of this video, because I don't want to spend hours on this, that model of this, and this is true for music listeners, it's true of all education. To get someone into something, they need to be motivated by it, and they're motivated by a visceral emotional impact on them, and they want to be a part of it. Education should be throwing that out, and then the kids that go, I really am into this carpentry, take them down the carpentry route, take them down, find the thing they like the most, right? And take him down it. Somebody really stood up against me the other day when I said this. I think it was on the other channel where I said people should do what they want to do, and they thought they were so beaten down and went, oh, for most people they can't do what they want to do. They've just got to do a job and do it well. It's much more complex than that. It's much more complex than that. I know where my interests are. I know what motivates me, and I know the sort of jobs that I could do that would be good for me to do, right? Let us say that. But anyway, my point is, once you motivate, then skill will develop. And once they fall into skill, they forget this formulating bit at the start. They forget it. They forget all about it. And so you have to, as a teacher, inspire them. And you inspire them with the counterintuitive. You lead them to the counterintuitive, and they have to discover it for themselves. They have to have that eureka moment of going, oh my God, I can't believe it. And whatever it is. And you have to know it's there, and you have to lead them to it. Now, the reason I've done this video is because there's a reason why I'm here doing this YouTube channel. And I think it's the fact that my experience as a music teacher combined with the fact that I'm really into jazz, fusion, prog and all this weird music, and the fact that I have a sort of philosophical bent, which is a little bit like against the prevailing ideas that actually informed rock and roll and prog and all that type of stuff. So that's where I'm coming from. On this channel, when I do a video on something, and it seems like, oh, what's Andy saying? Because what's promoting this is I did a video the other day. And what I did is I said, playing for the song is wrong. Now, playing for the song is a wrong idea. It's not a good way of approaching making music. It's not a good way of evaluating whether musicians are good or not, because it's just not true. But that's counterintuitive. And when I looked at the comments, I thought, here we go. We've got a whole bunch of people that have just gone, that's not true. And then they're just looking for how it not to be true. They're not going, well, listen to Andy, because he does know his stuff. He wouldn't be saying that without a reason. Yeah, I'm saying it for a reason. And those of you that really reacted against it, and people were getting so upset, you know, I like your channel, I love what you do, but this is absolute pants. It's a pair of pants. You know, and so I thought I will do this video now. And that is what I'm answering, is a lot of the time, the ideas that I'm putting across are not just half-baked ideas. They're ideas that I've formulated over the last 30, 40 years, and they worked, all right? And so when you're dealing with aesthetics, you have a choice, right? As an artist, and this is the fundamental now, right? This is the profound bit that you may find counterintuitive. You choose whether all music's the same and it's just taste. You choose whether people just want to do what they want to do. You choose that if you want. But when you're an artist, there's an aesthetic choice. And my choice will always be that there is a hierarchy, that some music is better than others, that if I can do something that's better, it will transmit more, it will be more profound to people, and that music is sometimes hard won by. I will assume that music is elitist, and the reason I will is because it is. By its very nature, it is elitist. Art, with a capital A, is elitist by its very nature because it is negotiating quality. But that is not a scientific truth statement. It's a statement that comes from us, from within. As individuals, you believe that something is true and you think it's better. But that does not mean that you have to then accept that everyone has their own idea of better, because once you accept that, it negates the original aesthetic claim you made. And so you look at it and then you have to say to yourself, and it's almost like an article of faith, is some art better than others? Are some musicians better than others? And the answer is they are, but it's really hard to explain why. And the reason why we're motivated to make art is because it's the only way that we can evaluate that. And that's how hard this is. And that's why art is as hard as science. And that is why you have to roll your sleeves up and get involved in it, because this is what we're dealing with. And that is why there's 1,000 videos on this channel and not one, because it is a negotiation and you're there for the trip. And one day you will close your eyes and you will be gone from this place, and who knows what happens then. But while you're in it, enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching this video.